You're listening to Deconstructive Criticism. I am Aaron Flam. This episode's guest is, once again, comedian Yoshi Obayashi. As you might remember from last week's episode with Yoshi and Chris Breaker, technical difficulties made me record 3 episodes with Yoshi. The first one is beyond salvation, I'm afraid, but the last one, which you will hear in a minute, is even funnier and more interesting than the previous one. Here we once again visit Yoshi's brain and delve deeper into his morbid interests. But first, a giant thank you to you who sponsors this podcast, whether it's on Patreon at patreon.com/AaronFlam, patreon.com/AaronFlam, via PayPal with Bitcoin, or on Swish 0046 768 943737. 0046 768 943737. You are truly a capitalist hero. You can also support me by buying my book, This is a Swedish Tiger, on Amazon. The book landed me in court for years as the Swedish state prosecuted me for selling and distributing it. I also want to inform you that next week we are visited by Dr. Magnus Norell to talk about the situation in the Middle East and the Swedish Quran burning that has garnered quite a bit of ire from the Muslim world. And the week after, Magnus will appear again to talk about Russia. The reason being that we first recorded a podcast about Russia and Ukraine this week, but then the situation with the Muslim world's response to the Quran burnings escalated to ridiculous levels when Iran's supreme leader, Ayatollah Khamenei, publicly said that Sweden had declared war on the Muslim world, which both me and Magnus felt garnered a response. We will also talk about the Israeli judicial reform that has now passed the Israeli parliament Knesset, the peace deal between Iran and Saudi Arabia by Chinese diplomacy, and more. You will therefore hear 2 episodes in reverse order, beginning with the one about the Middle East, which will be recorded later, the same day as I'm recording this message to you. Now, Yoshi Obayashi is an American comedian. Originally, he is Sainichi Korean, that is, Korean having been born and raised in Japan. Today, he is an American citizen based in Los Angeles, California, but constantly on the road. After graduating from the Evergreen State College, Yoshi entered the adult entertainment industry in Seattle for prestigious and controversial studio Evil Angel Productions as a DVD producer and has produced 800+ titles. During his time in the industry, he's worked with Hall of Fame directors John Stagliano, Rocco Siffredi, John Leslie, Joey Silvera, and Christoph Clark. Yoshi has also been involved in casting and finding talents for shows such as Jimmy Kimmel Live and The Man Show with Joe Rogan and Doug Stanhope. And he has consulted for 2 seasons on Dave's Old Porn for Showtime. In addition, and this is how we know each other, Yoshi is also a stand-up comedian and has opened for legends such as Dave Attell, Russell Peters, Jim Norton, Pablo Francisco, and more. You may have seen Yoshi in NBC's Last Comic Standing and Showtime's Comics Without Borders. For the last couple of years, Yoshi's been traveling all over the world to locations such as Afghanistan, Stockholm, and Morocco. If you want to see more of Yoshi, I strongly recommend that you go see him at the Edinburgh Fringe Festival, where he will perform in his one-man show, Adult Content. In this episode, we talk about Yoshi's obsession with the super rich and serial killers. Also, did his father kill himself or was he murdered? Enjoy.
Right. I don't know, it's number 4?
Something like that,
Okay.
yeah.
Which is a lucky number in Asian culture.
Yeah,
as
it
you
is
know.
death.
Japanese and Chinese. Did you say 3rd time?
What?
You said 3rd time is the charm?
Yes.
Yes. I think President Trump is saying that too.
You mean
He's running for the 3rd time.
Is he? I thought a second time. No, that is.
He lost the second one, but this is his 3rd time.
All right.
Yeah.
Let's see if he can make it this time then.
I can't remember. We had President I think it was Garfield. He won 1 term, lost, came back, won again. I believe he's the only...
Only president to have done that.
Yes.
Just give me a second. I need my snooze. All right. Here we go.
So I am back because I volunteered to give my seat up for Delta Airlines. They compensate me very well. So I'm here for 1 extra day and just...
You made more money getting bumped off of Delta than we did on this gig.
Yes, that is true.
So since we're doing this again for the third time, we're in Memphis.
Yes, Tennessee.
You're responsible for me being here. You invited me to Freedom Fest in Memphis 2023.
It was very successful because I knew you were going to do well for multiple reasons. Stand up and you're clearly very smart, but even smart people are not necessarily good conversationalists or say something interesting. And it really helps that you're smart, but also a comedian, because when you're a comic, you have a high tolerance for absurdity and nonsense. And hence, when you go to conventions like this, you meet a lot of oddballs, but also you find it incredibly interesting and sometimes lifelong friends. So I think it was worth it. Christian was excellent too. And I looked great. The people that I recommended did very well. They enjoyed it a lot. You guys are professional. You didn't cause any sort of problem, so that's great.
I'm going to be living off of this gig for quite some time. I mean, I had a great set. Dog Stanhope kissed me on the mouth when I came down from stage. He asked me for consent first. He was like, do I have your consent to kiss you on the mouth?
Yeah.
So this is probably I'm gonna be surfing on this feeling for a year.
Good. But I hope you go back and be consistent, do more shows back, you know. And I mean, we already talked about this. I don't know how comfortable you are, but it would be a thrill to see you and your family move to Texas, you know, Austin, because there's so many interesting things that are happening there. It's a collision course of comedy. Obviously, the music is a big part, politics, and podcasters, you know. And also you have, is it University of Austin?
Yes.
Okay, so this is new because I can't name all the names, but like Rob Henderson's and a bunch of other people like that who are not traditional professors, and they strike me more unorthodox, unwoke professors trying to do something different, and I think this is great. I love, what is that word that Chomsky, or was it John Galbraith used, countervailing force. So I like people who are contrarian and think differently, and I love what's going on in Texas, you know.
Yes, the pendulum is swinging back now.
Yeah, and if you watch one of Anthony Bourdain's episode of Parts Unknown, the Houston episode was one of the best episodes, I think, according to critic. And Houston's very interesting. They're saying like within the next 40 to 50 years, America's going to look exactly what's going on in Houston, which is racially diverse, you know.
I did not know.
Yeah, Houston really is the history, future of America. And also, there's I've read enough demographic change. Texas is going to be more, what is the color this? It's not blue or red. Purplish? I don't know what it is. It's almost hybrid of both conservative and liberalism. It's more moderate, I think, reasonable, I think. Because the things that are going on in the East Coast and West Coast are just unreasonable to me, in my opinion.
Yeah, well, you're from Japan. Were your family socialist?
No, I don't think so, because I think more than anything, I think they were more a pragmatist, you know. My family's Zainichi ethnic Koreans living in Japan, so I think they don't want to get too much attention to themselves. But one of my aunt used to have, I mean, I could talk about it, they don't do it anymore, but one of my aunt had illegal gambling business, and you do that by bribing the local police, and you work with the local mobs. And,
Yakuza.
Yeah, and Yakuza, which stands for Yakuza, which is 893, which makes 20. 20 is the worthless number in gambling. In other words, Yakuza are basically worthless member of society. And I have a sympathy for them because I'm ethnically Korean, and I don't remember the exact year, 1925 or 26. Sorry, don't know exactly the year. The Great Kanto earthquake. Kanto is the region area of Tokyo and Yokohama. They had a massive earthquake, just catastrophic. And shortly after the earthquake, within a few hours, I think, maybe a day, people were spreading ugly rumors about Koreans going around murdering, looting, and raping people. So there was massive lynching against Koreans. And I think the number of the people who were killed within the 10 days, next 10 to 14 days, it's pretty much comparable how many black people lynched in America from 1865 to like 1930s or something like that.
How many is that?
I don't know, between 8,000 to 10,000 people. And only one group, the police either ignore, pretend not to do anything about it, or they were actively killing Koreans, my understanding. And there's one particular group went out of their way to help the Koreans, which is Yakuza.
Why?
Because I think maybe that's their way of recruiting members, but also I'm sure they have their own reasons, but I think, well, I think they already have Koreans a member in Yakuza, I think, as it is. But I think...
So the Yakuza is really one of the more tolerant parts of Japanese society?
I think because they're such a pariah, they can't be too picky about who they could recruit. I mean, I know there's some Chinese, Taiwanese, and like other ethnic group, but I think the Koreans are the biggest non-Japanese group within Yakuza, I think. And anybody interested to learn more, they should read Jake Adelstein's book, Tokyo Vice, which is turned into an HBO special.
I haven't seen it.
Yeah, Jake is a Jewish American from St. Louis, went to Japan like early 90s, I think. And he wanted to learn more about anime and karate and judo and things like that. But eventually he realized he had an aptitude for Japanese. Sorry if I don't have the right background, but that's the gist I remember. And he was the first non-Japanese to win newspaper job for the most prestigious newspaper in Japan.
I think I saw the trailer. I think I saw the trailer, but
Okay.
I haven't seen the actual series.
Fantastic. I never met him. We have a couple of mutual friends. And when I asked him about, sometimes in Japan, they'll murder someone but make it look like a suicide. And I asked him via Twitter. He said, unfortunately, they do that. So I told him the situation with my dad. But yeah, there's...
Can you explain that situation to our listeners?
Oh, so they found... I got an email August of 2003, which is 20 years next month. And today's what, July 17 or something like that, 16. And one of my family members emailed me. The email just said, Papa dead. Not sorry to inform you your father's dead. It's just that's how old my family is. But yeah, my father was dead most likely August. They found his body in early August. Maybe he was dead in July, but we have no idea.
Suicide is what they said.
But my stepmother was doing all kinds of terrible things. I don't want to get too detailed because I talk about this so many times on like Joe Rogan or whatever, but to give a short version, they found my father's body August 2003. We don't know if it was suicide or murder. I went to Japan for my dad's funeral. I assaulted a bunch of people, including my stepmother, and I didn't return to Japan until March of this year, because Russell Peters' brother wanted to visit Japan, and I couldn't say no to famous comedian Russell Peters' older brother because they have done so much. So I went, but it just worked out. I didn't get in trouble. But going back to Edelstein, he was kind enough to answer my question. He pretty much confirmed what I always thought, which is, if you live in a country, the suicide is pretty common, and it's they think it's normal. And I got the feeling that similar in Scandinavia, perhaps, but. So it's easy to murder someone. I'm not saying he was murdered. I don't know. That's the part that bugs me. In best scenario, it's a suicide. In the worst scenario, he was murdered,
And neither of them are really good scenarios.
No. And I wanted to tell you, so last couple of days, I really enjoy it because I like helping people that I get along. I enjoy you and Adil in Sweden. Christian, I've known him only a year or two.
I'm just going to explain to the listeners that Christian is a Swiss comedian, Christian Breaker, and he was with us here. He opened up the show.
Yes, very good. And I enjoy introducing friends that I get along with my other friends. I don't want to mention the person's name, but there was a person within our group. This person's son killed himself a couple years back because he went to some website, and it's a controversial website. I'm not exactly what. And somebody found out that he went to this website trying to blackmail him. And I think he felt ashamed and embarrassed, and then want to put embarrassment to his parents. So he deliberately killed himself. So I think, I don't bring it up, but I'm well aware when I'm hanging out with him that he had his share of grief, suicide, and so did I, But I think it's worse for him because his son was a lot younger, And I think it was something that was extremely preventable. And I think whatever he was ashamed, I don't think it warranted death. I don't care what it is. You could overcome that. And besides, somebody's trying to blackmail you. No, you got to fight back with that shit. So we live in a strange time with this shaming and bullying and
Bullying?
Oh, sorry, I'm not saying it. When a bunch of kids are picking at you.
Yes. So tonight we're doing a gig.
Yeah, it's open mic. So because I didn't go back to Washington State, I made a decision to stay the night because I was compensated. And I thought, since you're here for another day, why not do another pod? And even the one where you recorded half, I still think you should release it like a funny bonus thing, because anybody's interested, they could listen to it. They could infer by my answer, probably the questions, but I think I mentioned in a previous podcast, I work in porn business editing, and sometimes we put up bonus footage where it's not particularly good scene and or interesting, but why throw that away? Because someone might see some value to it,
Well,
So,
you used to work in porn. You don't work in porn
No, I do some consultation when people randomly call me about or text, email.
What do you mean consultation? I mean, I know you're working on that book, right? There's a professor at, was it University of Washington or Georgetown?
He lives in D.C. He's writing, Kareem Sadajipur is writing a book about sexual proclivities of terrorists. I'm working on another documentary about a guy named Contusion. He was one of the worst pornographers in the 90s and early 2000s. And the lady that is part of that documentary now, Alexis Linklater, her grandfather's a very famous TV programmer. She did a podcast about Long Island serial killer, and he was captured 2-3 days ago. So, fortuitous. She finished that podcast like year and a half ago. So I just noticed even like yesterday and today, the media is just kind of talking to her because she did a very extensive, very well-made podcast about that. But when you make a serial killer or true crime, you never know if it ever get solved. But this is really great that it finally happened.
Did you listen to it?
Yeah, I listened to it. Because my friend Lucas, who originated this idea about doing the podcast about contusion, somehow he met through one of his friends, Alexis, and when they talk, they great chemistry. She definitely have a really good technical, and as a showrunner, I guess a documentary version, she's really good at it, covering crimes. So Lucas did a movie called Mope. It's a movie about, there's Black, African American, Asian American, Chinese porn star 10, 11 years ago.
What? African American, Japanese American, or Chinese American?
Chinese American and this African American. That black guy's named something Driver, and I forgot the Chinese porn star, but Mope is a porn term for one of the worthless performers. They usually kind of sit it around after the main star have sex with a girl, they get blowjob or something. They're just a really like open micers of porn. And what happened was the black guy lost his mind, and they were trying to kick him out at one of the porn warehouse. He refused to leave, and he got so angry he grabbed a samurai sword and tried to kill this white guy who owned the porn company, and this Chinese American porn star trying to intervene, trying to stop. Unfortunately, he was stabbed to death with a samurai sword. And Lucas made a movie about this. It's a pretty decent movie. I think Showtime bought it. Showtime also bought my documentary, Porndemic. And it's a small circles of people who work in porn business and or people who try to make some career or money from retailing porn stories or documentaries, So anytime anyone's trying to do anything porn, eventually they'll find my name because enough people know my name in LA. I'm not an expert, but just know a bunch of show business people from stand-up and other entertainment parts. So they call me, and I've been assisting him with that. But anytime there's like a TV or movies covering adult business,
you were excellent on stage, by the way, and I really liked your joke about George Floyd.
Oh no! Why you want me to talk about that?
Well,
we could skip it. I don't want you to get in trouble.
For what? I'm already in trouble. Don't worry about me, Yoshi. So he was, according to you, a porn actor.
Yeah, he was making movies. I think he was making amateur porn in Houston, Texas. Ironic, we were just talking about Houston, but they call him
The
Houston.
future of America.
Yeah, they were calling Houston Floyd. I was just telling people that there was a scene he's having sex with this beautiful black girl, and he's a pretty good performer. In fact, if he would have stick around, I think he could have done more porn later on. But one scene where she's sitting on his face a little too long, so he had to push her away and say, "I can't breathe." That was the gist of the story that I told on stage. Of course, I said it day before that the verdict on the cop who murdered him. And,
Derek Chauvin.
yeah, and nobody laughs, gasping air. There's one black lady in the room, you know, but I don't do it to like try to hurt people, but I do like pushing the envelope, you know. It's almost like a tightrope walker walking across one building with another. There is a thrill and danger when you do stuff like that. But yeah, I think most of the young comedians are like, they're so fearful, you know.
Because I've seen you before. I've seen you perform before, but only in Sweden.
Yeah.
And the Swedish audience, let's say they didn't like you much.
I don't think so.
No.
No. I mean, there's a few times I had a really good show, but those are usually I am playing very coy and trying to be charming, but those are not really fun for me. I think the reason I say that because I think some comedians get tired of saying same shit over and over, so they want to try something different. And I think this happened to you too. Sometimes you wake up in the morning, you have some idea for premise pop in your head. You're excited because you want to kind of go out and figure out if I could say this right, you know? And especially when you think something funny and try the first time and the audience love it, man, just very few things in life better than that, you know? And if it doesn't quite work out the way you think it should, you work a couple more times, kind of readjust and figure out how to present it, you know? And it usually works, but I think, especially a young person, you're afraid of silence and you want to be liked, you want to have a momentum, then, you know, you get nervous or you just keep writing the material that they will just laugh for sure. But we worked with Stanhope a couple of days ago, and first time I saw him, Comedy Underground in Seattle, man, he was fearless, just outrageous and just powerful performer and a thinker, you know.
Yeah. And
he's unfazed by that stuff.
Yes, and now we're here in one of the, I think, second or third most dangerous cities in
statistically, for sure.
United States, yeah. And we're going to some place where
it's 4 miles.
No, it's like 14 miles.
No, the club is 4 miles away.
Okay. Yeah, but it's not in this part of town, the touristy part. It's like
I don't think it's that bad because I think the person I asked is the gal I met a couple of days ago doing show. She's a teacher, white, attractive, and young, and I don't think she would go dangerous place. And I seen a poster for it. It just seemed like retarded version of Wes Anderson movies or something, you know. So it's one of those hipster room. I bet you, if anything. I think we should be fine. But I thought, you know, I'm not going home tonight. I could have gone to a hotel and just stayed there all day, I guess. But I figure since you're here, maybe they do a quick pod and do this show and maybe even grab something afterwards. And that's that, you know. Then what? You leave 3 o'clock in the morning?
Yeah, 3:30.
Okay, yeah.
I already booked an Uber. I'm going to try and talk him into passing by Graceland so I can get a pic before I board the plane.
Yeah. I don't think, I've been told you're not going to see much, and it's not particularly good. It's not a bad, but it's not the best area. But if you're leaving like that early in the morning, I have a hard time believing that Monday morning, that early in the morning, we're not talking Friday or Saturday night, so it should be fine.
So you're going to Edinburgh next month?
Yeah.
For the first time?
I've been there before. This is the first time performing.
Your show is called Adult Content.
Yes.
It's about your years in the pornography business.
Yes, but just like Sopranos, I guess technically it's about mob, but it was something bigger than that. Family and mental illness and other chaotic things. I thought it was really interesting that when Herman Melville, who wrote Moby Dick, somebody who read his book later on told him like he was really pleased with all the religious references and symbolism. And here's one of the genius of American great novel, didn't even realize he was doing that, right? So I wanted to do something different. And originally I was thinking about writing a book, but I'm just not a writer. I do have a friend re-edit everything I write, but it's not really my thing. I started writing during the height of COVID, 2020, and I didn't really make connection until I was thinking recently. My dad died August of 2003. Next month is 20-year anniversary, and I think there is a lot of reference to adult business, and I think some of the stories will give you a better glimpse of my personality or whatnot, or lack of it sometimes. But I've been telling friends that the first time I saw that phrase, adult content, I misunderstood. I thought it meant adult happiness, as in adult content.
Yes.
So...
Well, they're not too far apart, are they?
No. I think if you come from broken home and chaotic lifestyle, you have to go elsewhere to find some kind of stability or happiness, you know. I just happened from young age, knew a lot of sex workers and people who work in that world, and they were way more kind to me. And I don't necessarily think my parents went out of there to be cruel, but I think they just had so much problem growing up, and it was never resolved, you know. And I think sometimes they neglect their kids because I think they were just couldn't handle what was going on with their lives. So that's what happened. And
you grew up in Japan. You grew up in Japan.
Yeah.
Osaka.
Osaka, yeah.
So this was the red light district of Osaka.
Where I grew up, if you ever see the movie Tony Scott made, Black Rain.
Yeah, I did, with Michael Douglas.
Yeah, there's a scene when Northwest Airlines flying over, and they were flying over this bridge, and both of the entrance to the plane have a circular thing like this to attach. Looking from over plane, it looked like a gigantic glasses. And I was born probably less than a mile from there, and my home was basically like a couple blocks from there. So, why am I talking about? Oh yeah, that's my hometown, and I would just.
That was your hometown.
Osaka, Japan. Yeah.
You're an American now.
Yeah. But that's where I grew up, and within mile and a half from my house is one of the two largest red light district, you know, and I don't think we have that big of a stigma compared to the West with the sex works and things like that. And I just thought when I met people like that, they're just...
Yeah, Japanese don't really feel a sense of shame when it comes to sex.
I mean, this is not something they should be proud of or anything, but I don't think they have the same level of shame like Westerners.
I remember when I went to Japan, I just figured you have a really strange relationship with fish and sea creatures.
Yeah.
Because every sign you pass, even though it's not a sushi restaurant, it's fish-shaped or octopus-shaped.
Yeah.
And I very much doubt that the creatures of the sea feel the same way about the Japanese that the Japanese feel about them.
That's, you know, that stuff is always interesting because, for example, if you play the games, if you're old enough to remember Space Invader.
I am.
Yeah. The alien was pretty much based on like slimy monsters from the ocean. It was created by the Japanese, you know. And if you talk to Stephen King, he said the greatest horror writer is H.P. Lovecraft. And he was a racist, and for some really weird reason, he married a Jewish woman, and he was living in New York City because he's from originally Providence, Rhode Island. And he talked about fear, and there are many different kinds of fear, but the worst one is fear of unknown. And one thing he learned living in New York City is that there's one particular group he was completely afraid of, which was Chinese. Because when he went to Lower Manhattan and saw the Chinese, they spoke alien language, they looked alien, and they ate disgusting, according to him, and alien food. And I think if you go to modern Chinatown, all kinds of really weird food that smells and look weird. The main one's like the seafood, and he saw all kinds of slimy fish, octopus-like, squid-like. Well, if you look at H.P. Lovecraft's monster, Cthulhu, it looked like a giant octopus. And, you know, I think, yeah, for whatever reason, he just had a fear of Chinese. And I think he particularly than like black people, but he feared the Chinese the most because he thought Chinese were equally smart or smarter than white. He said something about Chinese are good at making money. And somehow he thinks that's equating to being smart, I guess. But yeah.
You know, I have this joke I do.
Yeah.
It's about the difference between anti-Semitism and racism.
Yeah.
Well, there's a very simple way to explain that difference.
Okay.
Racism is when you hate people from the lower races.
Oh. It's funny, but it does seem to have a merit because Jewish people do have, whether it is stereotype, but I mean, let's be honest. What is the percentage of Nobel Prize winners are Jewish people?
I don't know. But
it's massive. It's way more than the percentage of Jewish people in the world.
Yeah, but it could just be luck.
I don't know. It's a massive anomaly because it's like what 18-20% or something like that, and Jewish population is what, like less than 1% of the world.
Yes.
I'm not good with math, but let's say that figure is correct. That's like 20% of the world's Nobel Prize winners. I don't think it's a mistake.
No, I don't think so either.
No, and I think, I mean, I also know that rabbis usually have a highest level of education. Rabbi, I think, is in Hebrew for teacher or something like that.
Yes.
And I've talked to a couple of them. And they're the only religious group leader that seems to thrive when you question them. Many of the religious people seem to not liking that. So I think that's great. I mean, then was it Isaac or Abraham? Which one kind of questioned God?
All of them, I think, but
all of it. You know what I'm saying?
I think Abraham didn't question God as much, but Jacob is famous for wrestling with angels.
I see.
Jacob's ladder.
Yeah.
And I know Jonah.
Yeah.
You know the story of Jonah?
Yes.
You know, the guy with the whale fish?
Yes.
So he's one of the prophets, right?
Yeah.
And you know, normally prophets, the stories about the prophets work like this. So there's some place that is full of sinners.
Yeah.
Yeah. And God just picks someone normally not from that place and tells him to go to that place and tell them that they're going to die because they're sinners.
I see.
And Jonah never really appreciated the job that he was given by God. Not that he had much else to do.
Sure.
But that's why he tried to get away on the boat, and then they threw him overboard because God sent a storm because he was trying to escape his job, you know. And then he was eaten by a whalefish, and as we both know today, whales are fish, and fish aren't whales. And it threw him up on the beaches of Nineveh, so he goes into town, and he tells them, like, you're all going to die.
Yes.
And the people of Nineveh, they're so sorry. They're like, is there anything we can do? Can we repent? Can God forgive us somehow?
Sure.
And Jonah's like, calls his boss up and goes like, is there anything they can do about this? And God is like, nope, I've made up my mind. They're all going to die.
Right.
Yeah, so he's like, no, there's nothing you can do. And then he just leaves town. And they dress in like sackcloth, and they cover their faces with ashes, and they cry to God. And God actually changes his mind because the God of the Old Testament is quite moody, bipolar in certain senses. And so he forgives them. And then Jonah gets very upset with this because he has done his part of the deal. You know?
Right.
He's done his job. He's told them they're going to die. And then God just goes and changes his job description, basically.
Right.
So I think there's plenty of examples in the
What
Old
does that mean
Testament.
when God does that? As a scholar, does that mean anything to you?
If you ask a rabbi, it probably means 1,000 different things.
I see.
But I was just using it as an example. People in the Old Testament question God quite a lot.
What is that thing that his name is Soren Kierkegaard, the Danish? Doesn't he talk something about Abraham's anguish where he is asked to kill his son? And I think the whole notion is the fact that you agonize through whether to comply and worship your God's wishes or not to do it because your responsibility to your son. The very fact that you're struggling with that, it's a sign that he is actually a moral person. A psychopath doesn't really struggle with the moral decisions. They just fucking do whatever, right?
Yeah, I think Jews and Christians interpret that part of the Bible differently.
Oh, okay.
So for Jews, it's a story where the moral is you shouldn't have human sacrifice. and you shouldn't sacrifice your children.
Yes.
Not even for God.
Right.
And I think
Really?
Yeah, and I think Christians read it as a sort of pre-sacrifice of Jesus Christ.
Yeah.
So for them, it's just something that ties into the sequel, the New Testament. I call that the sequel, or Bible 2.
Yeah, just like Nagasaki's sequel to Hiroshima, right?
Yeah.
Interesting. So that's why I have to say, when it comes to humor, Jews do make me laugh because they're not really worried about questioning things, you know. I think it's great because I think if you're Muslim, you're supposed to submit to Allah, right?
And Japanese are also very questioning, critical, individualist. I'm being sarcastic.
Yes, they don't like that. Okay.
So I think questioning is part of Jewish culture.
Yeah, I mean, it shows in science. You know, I think most Asian kids are very good at math and science. I mean, math, not necessarily because we're smart, especially for Japanese in Chinese, writing those Chinese characters over and over. Only way you can remember those Chinese characters, repetitively writing them. So you almost have when your hand have a physical memory of writing certain characters, right? And that translates into math, where you keep doing math equation and memorizing formula by repeatedly writing it over and over. And I think Asians do well because they work really, really hard. But to have scientific and mathematical discovery, you have to question the previous thinkers' theories and refute that. And I think that's where Asians do not do very well, because I think our cultures are not really raise us to question things. Whereas the Jews are really good because even the rabbis don't get mad. They love the challenge and like arguing with people. You know, I think it's wonderful. I think.
I'm just wondering how we got to this point from asking you about your process of writing your show, Adult Content.
Oh, sorry. So I'm not. See, that's why I'm performing preview 10 days from now, and next Sunday I will be doing preview in Washington State. I'm still struggling. I don't know what to do about.
But you started writing it in 2020, right? Like during the lockdowns.
Yeah.
How were those lockdowns, by the way, for you? Did you continue performing, or?
I will answer that the story if you could remind me. COVID was wonderful for me. It was great. I was getting all kinds of financial assistance without even ask. I was living in Phoenix, and I was living in such an isolated place. I was more concerned with hyenas, wild pigs, scorpions, tarantula, and things like that, rattlesnakes, and more than anything. And
where was this?
North of Phoenix. It's between Phoenix and Anthem, so it's middle of nowhere. I was taking a bunch of online courses. I was calling 3 to 10 people every day, make sure everybody's all right. I was reading, and I got bored, and I was walking 10, 11 miles a day, every day.
So you made the best of it.
Yeah.
But that's when you started writing adult content as well.
Yeah, I wrote this one story, and I got bored. So one night I wrote it. It's something that happened at the Taboo adult video store where I used to work in downtown Seattle in the late 90s. And I just remember something. I wrote it. My friend Rick Hall made it, edited and grammatical correction. And once it was done, I put it on my Instagram with a couple of pictures and really didn't think too much of it. And I was surprised the overwhelming positive feedback. It's not a really funny story at all. It's actually very sad. It's bittersweet, I guess. So I thought, wow, I didn't really expect that reaction. So maybe I could just think about writing things I remember. And over the years, whether it's a joke or interesting trivia idea, I will write a sentence or paragraph, 3x5 cards, write them and just keep it in the bag. Just piles and piles of that stuff. Not knowing what I was going to do it, but I figured if something interesting popped in my head, might as well write it down and keep it. And maybe 5-6 months later, when I look at it, maybe I could remember, now I can make joke out of it or something. So I did that. So last 3 years, I thought I was going to make a book out of it. I wrote 16 stories. It's in my website, adultcontent69.com. On the menu section, there's like 16 or 17 short stories, it's there. But last year I went to French Fest because one of the actresses was performing a story about Ghislaine Maxwell. It piqued my interest. So I thought, I've never been to Scotland. I would like to see the show. And I told a couple of people that I'm visiting Scotland for a day. And somebody said, well, you know a kid named Anthony Schumann, new comic in Washington State. Why don't you meet up with him? So after I saw Ghislaine Maxwell's show, I saw Anthony. And he was telling me how it was going for him. He was doing a show. Anthony's quite young. He's a lot younger than myself. He served in U.S. Army. He was in, I think, near Kandahar, the spiritual home of Taliban. He and 4 or 5 other company of Army soldiers, one of them stepped on IED, and they just blew up. Luckily, everybody survived, but he's suffering from PTSD. And he started doing comedy, and I think he was basically talking about his PTSD and trying to be a father, you know. And he was performing, and I saw him, and he told me everything that was good about the festival and everything that was bad, and it kind of piqued my interest. So I thought, why don't I, instead of finishing the book, try to do the show there and see if people like it or not. But I didn't realize until recently. I think it was more of I think I needed to be someplace and have a structure of doing something every day, because there's part of me, I was worried that I go to Japan and find my stepmother because I blame her for my father's death. I'll find her and beat the shit out of her again, you know. So I thought, go Scotland. Scotland's also one of the 2 places my dad wanted to go. First one is America, which he did. He never had a chance to go to Scotland. So I thought, do the show, make a productive month out of it, talk about big chunk of my life.
So you're going to be there for a month? The entire month?
I'll be there from August 1st through at least August 27th.
Wow. It's a beautiful city, Edinburgh.
The 2 times I went, I'm literally there for like 12, 18 hours. I fly in, check the town, take the bus, go to London. So I haven't even slept a night there. But interesting place. It's the home of David Hume, Adam Smith. Happy birthday, Adam Smith. He turned 300 years, June 16, 1723.
All right.
And
you continually surprise me.
Why?
Well, first of all, because your interests are so special. I mean, the porn, the serial killers, the terrorists.
I have a wandering. You know how women get mad when we have a wandering eyes.
Yeah.
I have a wandering mind. I can't really concentrate. Like, I know for a fact, someone like you could sit down, read heavy, difficult book like Christopher Lash or.
Well, I have the focus of the samurai.
You could read those books, but not only that, you could read it and you could comprehend what you're reading, and stuff like this beyond me. So when I cannot read original text, I have to read a book about that to kind of give me some sense of what's going on. And you know, when you go to New York City, if you go Nobu, which is a famous sushi place, he is partner of Robert De Niro. That restaurant is so popular. If you can't get in, you go to another restaurant next to it, which Nobu owned, called Next to Nobu. So since I cannot understand the original text, I have to go second or third source. And there's no shame, like when you try something you don't have aptitude or something. But if you have interest, you could put any efforts, you know. And I did that.
But you're going to be doing your show pretty much every day for almost a month.
August 4th through 26th minus 2 Sundays. So
why you go to church on Sundays, Yoshi?
No, that's what they told us. There's those 2 nights I'm not doing shows. I guess I only pay for the 19 days.
Do you know what venue it is?
Oh yeah, I think it's. Oh my God, Greenside, something green. Sorry. If you go French Fest website and a show or the performer's name, if you put Yoshi, it will say Yoshi Obayashi's adult content will pop up.
So last time you went solely to see a show about Ghislaine Maxwell, Jeffrey Epstein's wife,
ex-girlfriend.
Yes, because you have an unhealthy obsession with her.
I have obsession with her and many other things. I don't necessarily think it's unhealthy. You know, I think you asked me this, and I have many people asking. They always say, "You must be fucking sick to want to know stuff about serial killers, serial rapists, terrorists, financial criminals, and things like that." And on the surface, I understand why people say it, but I don't think you would say the same thing if a scientist is studying about disease. They're not pro-disease. They want to study disease to how we could learn to have, trying to eradicate it and find cure for those diseases. Just like if somebody's obsessed with cancer or something, they're not pro-cancer. Or somebody who's studying war is not pro-war. They want to know what caused it, how do you prevent it, and how we minimize it, right? So my feeling is these people are doing things that is abhorrent, trying to figure out what happened to their childhood that happened to this. And if we know that certain life experience contribute to this kind of behavior, we need to try to eliminate that for betterment of humanity, right? So whenever people say sick, I just think two things could be true. Yes, it is kind of sick, but there is some necessity to study something like that.
Yeah, but I mean, you went to her trial, and you got in the day she was...
I went to multiple days, and if you go in and couldn't get in the actual courtroom where she's sitting, they'll take you to the secondary room, the court that looks exactly the real room, except it's full of TV monitors. So you're sitting in the very same seat where she's sitting nearby it. There's a TV, and you can actually watch the case, if as though you're in the same room. And I got sick and tired of going secondary room. So every day I go early, and every day I don't get in. Maybe there's one person extra ahead of me or two. So I got sick of it. So I went December 29th and said, I'm fucking going there at 1:32 in the morning, stand all night in line to get in. And the reason why there was a limited amount of space is because there was still somewhat height of fear of COVID. So you can only have 4 civilians and 4 journalists, which is a lie, because a lot of times whoever takes 4 spots for journalists, other journalists pretend like they're civilian and take the civilian spot. But I was the only non-journalist. So there's 8 of us getting every day. Just pure coincidence, the day I got in is the day they had a verdict for her. So...
and how many years did she get?
I can't remember, 10, 15 years, maybe 20.
And you told me that you thought that she only got convicted because Jeffrey died of natural causes.
Yes, I think if Jeffrey Epstein was alive, I believe that the state will use her as a state witness, testify against him, and probably give her minimal punishment, right? What is that thing that Machiavelli called? There's a fortune of war. There's a luck involved, or unlucky involved in history of mankind. And what can I say? It was unlucky for her. I can't remember. There was another lady who ended up marrying one of the NASCAR stars. She was also assistant, Caroline something, if I remember right. She was assistant to Jeffrey Epstein, and she was also procuring young girls. And worse yet, she was also taking naked pictures of teenage girls, which is considered child porn. But some reason, nobody went after her, So I don't understand why they will only selectively pick people. And I think sometimes government want to have a clean cut. They want to look good. They don't want to complicate things. I think in the previous part I know a guy named Joshua Nichols, who is son of Terry Nichols, one of the 2 guys bombed Oklahoma City in 1995. And I believe, I believe there's more than 2 guys who are involved in this thing. But FBI and the U.S. government want to have a clean cut, clean ending to it, because for those of you listening to this in Europe, none of this stuff makes sense, but this was a very tumultuous 90s. We had a Ruby Ridge incident where FBI shot and killed Randy Weaver's wife in Idaho, place called Ruby Ridge. There was a bit of a shooting match over nothing, really, in my opinion. And because of the disaster, Ruby Ridge led to Waco, because they were trying to arrest this religious nut and trying to make a scene and project this confidence by the U.S. government. Well, it backfired. It was a disaster.
Yeah, the Waco.
Branch Davidians, and I've been there 3 or 4 times. And
why? Why do you go to these places? That's what I brought up Ghislaine Maxwell, because you've gone to her home. Mm-hmm. You've gone to almost all homes that Jeffrey Epstein.
I went to everyone except for the pedophile island, St. James. Yeah.
And Waco 3 times, Kabul 3 times.
Yeah.
Anytime we start talking and the name of a serial killer comes up, which if one talks to you, Yoshi, they come up all the time.
Yeah.
You've been to their home, you've been to their school, you've been to the cemetery with their families.
Not all of them, but at least the major the major stars, all stars of serial killers for sure. Yeah.
So which serial killers' homes have you been to?
Well, the big ones obviously like Ted Bundy, Gary Ridgway, aka Green River Murder in Washington State. I went to David Berkowitz, aka Son of Sam. I went to Jeffrey Dahmer in Wisconsin. I went to Boston Strangler, Hillside Strangler. I went to, I think they call him Candyman, Dean Coral down in Houston. I went to, what's her name? The female serial killer that Charlize Theron played in the movie Monster. I went, I'm kind of blanking her name, but I went to her, the hotel that she used to sleep in Florida, near Daytona. There's a bar that she used to hang out. In the back of the bar, they used to keep a coffin, and she used to sleep in the coffin. I took a picture of me sleeping in that coffin as well. And
what do you
Albert Fish, who is, I believe he was Jewish, and he ate children.
Ate children?
He murdered them and he ate them, yeah. Albert Fish. I went recently to, why am I blanking his name? He was a pedophile in Washington State, in Vancouver, Washington. I went to this park where he lured these two kids, and I was a kid at the time, and I'm blanking his name. I could see his, not Dalton, what is it? God damn it, I'm blanking. I could see his face, but anyway, yeah, he raped both of these boys and just killed them. I went to that park in Vancouver, Washington. I met John Muhammad, one of the DC snipers.
And that was a fairly recent one, I think, because I was in Canada
This is like 20 years ago, 2003, yeah. 2005 or something, yeah.
2002, 2003, because I remember it was on the news.
Yeah.
And it was quite special because it was like a black guy and his nephew, right? And they had
They're not related, but he was calling him his nephew.
Okay, and they had converted like their car so you could
shoot from the back of the trunk, yeah. And it was so random. You know, like someone like Ted Bundy will always kill slender, attractive white women with brunette. And that was kind of similar thing in, I shouldn't be laughing, but David Berkowitz. So there was a panic with all the women changing their hairstyle and things like that, you know. But I think someone like John Muhammad and that kid that was going around murdering people, the murder victims were so random, just like Richard Ramirez.
But they were all white, weren't they? I don't know. I'm just asking you. You're the expert.
I can't remember.
So do you believe in evil? It's a big question, I know, but you seem to be so fascinated with it.
I'm interested because I think I don't like. I was so naive, you know. 1988, when I graduated from high school, I worked on Michael Dukakis' campaign. Right, I liked him because he's Greek. I love Greek people. I like Greek mythology. I like Greek mythology because they believe in patricide, that the idea of killing one's father, I think is necessary. I believe that's a really good concept because you cannot have a new order unless you kill the old. So our founding fathers killed our old father, the King George, to create a new and better country. And patricide is an abhorrent idea in Asia because we have a tendency to have a cult of personality like people like Mao Zedong and Kim Jong-un. But there's been figures like that where you just automatically assume any old Asian man on top should be sacred and you should challenge them. And I think this is a particular part that I like the Greeks and also Jews like questioning things and take up matters in hands and get rid of tyrannical.
Yeah, but the question was, do you believe in evil?
I mean, I don't know if I necessarily believe in like the way biblical people say it, but there is perversion and corruption. And when I call myself pervert, I don't mean like pervert like capital P. It's what I'm saying, like there's most guys are pervert in a cute, silly way and out of weakness. But I think when I say perversion with a capital P, I think that's almost like a biblical sense. I think it's turning away from something that is good and decent and virtuous, you know. And if you want to call that God, that's fine. If you're a free market person, you know that maybe that's a communism for you. But I think something sacred is necessary. And I didn't feel like this until, relatively speaking, I think things changed for me 2017, you know.
How so?
I went, this is kind of really kind of silly. One time I was working at my friend Brandon Irons gangbang. I was doing paperwork because sometimes he hires me to do gangbang paperwork. So there are a bunch of guys with one girl, and somebody could do the paper to prove they're 18 years old and they're HIV negative. So Brandon paid me to do the paperwork.
So you were an administrator in this porn situation.
Yeah. And you have a bunch of like dysfunctional, antisocial idiots, you know, and there's like 15 to 20, maybe even like 25, 30 of them, right, with the one girl. But I remember there was two guys arguing with each other, right? They're both standing naked, keep stroking their dick, make sure they could hard. When they're given a chance, they have to do it to scene with the girl. They have to be ready. But one guy was Protestant, other one was Catholic, and they were arguing over that. And I thought kind of absurd that two guys stroking their dick, one guy said superiority to Catholicism, and the other one said superiority to Protestant, right? And the one thing that they were getting all angry, they kept mentioning August 31st, 1517, over and over. That is the day when Martin Luther put 95 Theses in the church protesting against the corruption of Catholic Church.
The Reformation.
Reformation starts on that day. So I was sent to church as a kid, and I think most Koreans think to be Presbyterian. Presbyter, I think, means like elder, kind of compatible with their culture, which is that older men running the whole society, and that particular brand of Christianity was compatible with the Koreans. Anyway, he was going back and forth, and I remember like 15, 17.
So they were having a religious argument
at the gangbang.
At the gangbang.
Yeah, so...
A filmed gangbang, so a porn shoot.
So there's always something absurd happen, live in LA with narcissism, show business, porn, you know, so it's kind of amusing to see that. But I remember that day, and I remember October 31st, 2017, I thought, why don't I go to that town in Germany and check it out, the 500-year anniversary. So I've been traveling for historical reason. When I lost my job in 2012, and I don't know, I mean, I don't mind spending my own money to go in places, anniversary and things like that, check it out. And I was very impressed. There were so many Americans of all faith kind of celebrating this important day, the start of Reformation. And I think
no Catholics, though, right?
I can't remember.
You should have asked.
I think there was a lot of Methodists and kind of people like that. A lot of from, for some reason, Minneapolis, like Minnesota or something, I remember. But they were like, well, it's great, you know, even if you're not religious, this is just wonderful that you're here. And they were, I was surprised how civil and kind they were, you know, contrary to depiction that television and movies make in Hollywood, right? And I think more I travel this country in America, more often than not, religious people tend to be way better than the way they're presented in television movies. And so-called liberal people, in actuality, when you spend time with them, tend to be more narrow-minded and kind of pricky. And I don't like them, you know.
But you don't, you're not religious yourself.
I wasn't brought up religion at all, but although I was sent to Catholic school 7th and 8th grade.
Really?
Yeah.
Here in the States or back?
Yeah. And I'm not against it. I just don't like, if you're religious and being hypocritical, I don't like that. But my friend LJ, he's an African-American Catholic. He doesn't like Obama because as a Catholic, it's an aberration to kill babies. And I love LJ because he never, ever bend. He is who he is. I'm not going to bend just because the guy looks like me. And his whole family's mad at him. But I love people like that. I love people that really believe what they believe. And even if it's not popular, they don't give a fuck. And I usually get along with people like that more because he clearly do not condone my lifestyle, but he knows that I don't lie and I don't do bullshit either. So we respect each other to get along. And I don't know if you know Glenn Greenwald, the journalist.
The journalist, yes.
I love the guy. He said something really interesting. I didn't know her husband passed away, and he was sick for a long time. And his adversary in politics in Brazil was Catholic, I think. I'm pretty sure Catholic, anti-homosexuality. But it's interesting.
Because Glenn is gay. Glenn is gay.
Yes. When Glenn's husband was sick, and clearly his husband was dying, his political allies would show up for like 2 minutes, 5 minutes, say hello, take a picture with the sick person, and leave. Good publicity. But this man who was religious and against homosexuality would show up every single day, spend hours next to him. Yes, he doesn't condone his life, but he doesn't hate the guy. And I think that's the part that we don't see enough in this country. Just because somebody's in different politics and they don't agree with you, that doesn't mean that you can't be friend with them. And this is what's so sad about this country. It's just a lot of Americans are naive and not serious, childish. I'm like, why do you? They don't have to agree with everything that I believe to be a friend. We're in a very silly phase. They're easily offended.
Yeah.
They don't have. Many of the young kids don't have tenacity. They're weak, and they haven't done due diligence to find out why does someone that think different from me. Is it possible that I could be wrong? Isn't Carl Jung said the best way to know if you're a good person is to admit that your capacity to be evil? And these liberal people that I meet in Hollywood, it just never even occurred to them that they could be wrong and evil. It's the worst. And I noticed that I have a respect for conservative and religious more often than not. And I'm a scumbag pervert working pornography, but I respect religious people because they believe what they believe. And you know this as well as I do. Conservative know more about liberal position than liberal people know more about conservative because
Absolutely.
most conservative gone to church, so they have a incredible biblical sense of the universe. They know the Old Testament, they know the New, and more sophisticated religious Christian, they tend to know a little bit of other religion, and nothing makes the world better than when you understand other people's religion, you know?
Yeah.
But these liberal people, like when you talk to these young kids in LA and stuff, if you say promised land, the belly of the beast, you know, or how
Biblical expressions.
biblical expression, or when Martin Luther talk about, you know, like Moses in the 40 years in the desert, you know, this is like a common thing that most Black and Latinos gone to churches understand. Those liberal white kids devoid of those knowledge, you know, so they have a silly notion of the universe, which is like their egocentric view. They don't have expansive view of the universe. You don't have to be religious, but you should have some notion of that. How could you read Shakespeare's work not knowing how King James Version Bible had a huge influence in it? How could you not, how do you appreciate Milton's Paradise Lost not having some sense of a religious text, you know? Or Dante's
Inferno.
Yeah, Paradiso and Purgatorio and things like that. I think it's necessary, you know. When you look at Gilgamesh.
I'm sorry, Divina Commedia.
Huh?
Dante's Divina Commedia? No?
Yeah. I'm just saying, it's hard to know other culture if you don't know yours. So I know I'm a minority, but I'm not particularly a big fan of multicultural stuff because I think you have only 4 years, and if you study a little bit of everything, or you learn superficiality, I think just because I'm not white, I should know a bit about Western civilization because America is heavily influenced by that.
Yes.
And if you don't know...
Well, a prime example is Hamtramck, right? Michigan?
Yeah.
That little town, have you heard of it?
No.
So it used to be like a Polish Catholic town, but very progressive, like Democrat, right? And they took in a lot of Muslims.
Yeah.
And now it's a Muslim majority town, I think. Probably the only Muslim majority town.
Yeah.
And everyone on the city council is a Muslim man.
Yeah.
No Muslim women, of course, just Muslim men. And they just outlawed pride flags.
Okay.
So the liberals in Hamtramck, they now feel betrayed.
Yes.
Because, you know, they thought we let you in when everyone else was xenophobic against you.
Yeah.
No one wanted you to live in their area.
Yeah.
And now we have minarets and you pray to Allah 5 times a day.
Yeah.
And we can't celebrate Pride because... So they didn't understand what religion they took in.
Yes.
Yeah, they had no idea. They just wanted to seem good.
Yes.
Like your Hollywood celebrities. They didn't really care about the values of a socially conservative Muslim person.
Yeah, but I understand because I never thought, remembering that 9/11, 2001, when within a short amount of time people realized it had something to do with the group of men.
What happened then?
Muslim men had something to do with it, and but to see recently where so many Muslim parents are fighting against school board for this crazy thing that they're doing, which is sexualizing kids.
You mean
Allah Akbar,
yeah.
like God bless them, because I think, look, you're only going to be kids.
I think, personally, I think it's a mistake of conservatives and Christians in this country to ally themselves with Islam, because I think Islam has a different agenda. Because when I meet conservatives here, they seem to accept, for instance, homosexuality. I mean, they don't want their kids to learn about it in school, but if you're a homosexual, they'll accept you for it,
Yeah.
I don't think it's quite the same in Islam. Not yet, because Islam, unlike Christianity, hasn't had a reformation, nor have they had a renaissance or an enlightenment. So when you go to the Middle East, and you've probably been to the Middle East, haven't you?
Yes, but I have to say, who saved most of those Aristotle and Plato's treaties, books during the Dark Ages? It was Muslims,
Yes, but it was a... are you talking about Ottomans or Arabs?
Well, I mean, if you want to get that technical, I'm not sure which was doing what. I just know that during Dark Ages, including those Irish Catholic monks were doing...
Yes, but this was before the Reformation, and before the Renaissance, and before the Enlightenment. And in that world, comparatively, the Muslim world was enlightened.
Yes.
If you compared it to the Christian world at the time.
And I'm sure some Muslim scholars have a private explanation what happened. I'm not going to argue because I don't think I know enough.
No, it's fine.
But I also know that, boy, it is very hard to resist American pop culture, which is one of America's religion,
Yeah.
And I think I have met enough moderate Muslims in America. I don't necessarily have that big of a fear about that, but you could quite well be right. Who to say? I'm not going to even dispute because I don't know, but I will say that I'm comfortable with them. But you're right. They did not have Reformation, and they don't have religious leader like Pope for Catholic and so on. But I definitely have a different attitude of religion because I didn't like it growing up because you grew up in Japan and nobody teach you religion. As soon as you move here, they start throwing all this idea that I don't know what they're talking about. Like Mary was pregnant without having sex. Like I don't understand. I'm from Japan. We take science classes, right? And then later on I realized it doesn't literally have to be true. What is that story in the Greek mythology where a turtle and a rabbit's racing and rabbit So obviously that never happened, but it is a nice story to teach young kids about tenacity and take things seriously and so on. So there's some value in things that is not real.
Yeah, I absolutely agree on that.
Yeah. So, but I think in terms of what those religions going to do in future, I have no idea, but I think I'm more tolerant about that. I just don't like more of what's going on in Hollywood and stuff. It really irritates me because I deal with them more often than not. And they're more of a threat to me doing my comedy and stuff,
Yeah, they want to censor you.
Yeah, I mean, religious people don't like it, but at least if you're fair, like, all right, you made a good point, I mean, when I hear one Christian group saying Mormons are cult and ridiculing them by saying they're superstitious, like, I'm sorry to tell you, but you're superstitious too, if you believe in something.
Yeah, but so because we got here from the question of do you believe in evil? So do you believe Ted Kaczynski, Ghislaine Maxwell, Jeffrey Epstein, Son of Sam, were they evil? Jeffrey Dahmer?
God, I don't know how to answer this one because they all seem to have a traumatic childhood experience.
Jeffrey? Did he have a traumatic childhood, Jeffrey Epstein? Ghislaine Maxwell didn't have a traumatic childhood.
Oh, sure, because when she was born, her oldest brother got killed in a car accident. They neglect her. And because she was neglected, she had this need to please her father all the time, and her father was very abusive. And Robert Maxwell was also lived in very traumatic because he barely survived Holocaust in World War II. And basically everyone in his village was killed.
Who was he?
Robert Maxwell was a big media tycoon in the same level of Rupert Murdoch. And in fact, they were bitter rivals.
And what did he do?
Robert Maxwell was a big tycoon, owned a media company and newspapers. And he grew up in a very tumultuous and a problematic and very difficult childhood because as a Jewish person in poverty, he didn't have enough food and constant survival because they're always, as you know, they were trying to eliminate Jews. And I think he was also known to be extremely smart, good with languages. He used his language skill, his charm, intelligence to sell intelligence to all kinds of different groups, Bulgarian, Romanian, French, I'm sure Mossad, and Russian and English. That's why he was able to travel so many different places during World War II because he had an incredible ability to speak different languages, you know. And when he lost his family, I think there's only thing I know about Robert Maxwell that when he showed grief, he had a habit of looking at any Holocaust documentary over and over. He's probably seen just about everything because he was hoping to see his mother and father somehow, a footage of them. And I think there's only one time he broke down when he went to Israel. There's some very famous religious wall. This man just broke down and cried.
Yeah, it's called the Wailing Wall.
Is that what it was?
It's part of the old Jewish temple.
Yeah.
A lot of people, when they see it for the first time, start crying, not only Jews.
Yeah,
I mean,
I'm not saying that he was a good person. He did some terrible things, but I think when you grow up in that circumstance, when people are trying to kill you and you're impoverished, and when your entire village is wiped out, and the only thing that he could do is just constantly look in those documentary of Jews getting killed.
But he was not a serial killer.
No. But
he wasn't the head of a sex ring or a trafficking ring.
No, but he was definitely had to keep changing his name, changing his personality to survive. He had an opportunity, and the opportunity he found was he somehow got money from some intelligence agency, maybe prior agency before CIA or something, possibly.
OSS.
Oh, yes, and maybe MI5 or MI6. I always get one of those confused. One of those Western intelligence agency providing him a huge sum of money. And if I remember right, he bought a bunch of scientific textbook. Mm-hmm. So during the World War II, many scientists wrote a textbook. And because during the war, they were not able to sell books. Also, there's not a whole lot of money in text. But what he did was he bought warehouse after warehouse full of scientific books. And when the scientists writing this book, they were just grateful that anybody would buy them. At the end of the war, when they have to rebuild those countries, they need scientists. That's when he started making money by selling those scientific textbooks all over the world. And he parlayed that money into other ventures like media. So newspapers, you know.
But
so,
how did we come in? How did we start discussing him? I asked you about evil. And
because you asked him Ghislaine, and I don't think she was born. I don't think she's a psychopath. Psychopaths are born that way, but I think many of them have a traumatic experience.
So would you say psychopaths are evil?
The evil thing is so it means different thing to different people. So obviously there are people who do evil things. Obviously,
yes. All the time.
All the time. Is a mental illness, and because they're born psychopath. Let's say for argument's sake, being psychopaths evil. Then I guess if that's the case, then some people are born evil. But sociopath is something that traumatic experience in their environment made them sociopath. So if you grow up in a terrible environment and you turn evil, did you choose to be evil, or the circumstance made you evil? You know, I'm sure. I think you'll be better off talking to some religious figure. I don't know the answer to it, but
I ask you because you seem so fascinated with these people.
I'm fascinated because I don't know that solution to prevent something from happening. But if I talk about this enough times, my feeling is somebody smart will figure out something. That's my hope, you know. I'm trying to expand people's imagination by saying these are the oldest weird things happen, because every time I talk to some young kid, he doesn't know any of these things, you know.
Yeah. Well, you told me yesterday that, what was it? That when you come to a new place, and you've been to every state except 3 in the United States, you've traveled the world quite extensively.
Yeah.
And the first thing you want to know when you come to a new place is, tell me about your sex scandals, your murders.
Terrorists, serial killers. Yeah.
Because you think that says more about them.
Yeah, there was a guy named Shohei Imamura. He's one of the great Japanese directors. He used to work for Ozu, who is considered to be one of the greatest directors of all time. He made a movie called Tokyo Story, which is always in top 10 greatest movie of all time. Anyway, Ozu present ideal version of everyone's life, right? This is what Imamura called waist up, the stuff that you present yourself day to day, the good side. Imamura interested in waist down, the pussy, dick, asshole, and dirty feet side of your society. So, and when you have these terrible things, what does it say about your society? You know, what were they born like that, or did the society created them? Right? Like, isn't that sociologist Durkheim say that? He said that people commit certain kind of crime because society is sick. If a society is sick, they create sick people. I'm not going to get into it because, you know, people have a different agreement. Like some people, the religious people say they're born evil. And Jean Rousseau, doesn't he say that people are born naturally good? I kind of go back and forth on a lot of that stuff. But I love going to those places, study it, and I just want to pass this story down to young people. And I know, even with all these millennials acting like a spoiled and idiotic, every generation always surprises you by great individuals and leaders and scholars and things like that. So when I talk about these things, the listeners going to whatever the field you want to go and trying to solve solution for it, you know. But I talk about sex because I think it's a necessary conversation. People feel uncomfortable talking about it. People feel uncomfortable talking about money. Those are the two main subject matter that I think most people are uncomfortable talking. Religion probably is like a third place or something like that.
Yeah, and
but money
and those two are your main interests. Really, you're fascinated by the ultra rich, and you're fascinated by, well, what should I say? Sex maniacs.
Yeah, it's almost like that thing that you see in Godfather. Remember?
Yeah,
the puppeteer. So you have that string. I just think a lot of people are motivated by money and sex. You know.
Yeah. Well, and so did Freud.
Yeah. So. You know, when I graduated from high school, I just saw a lot of impoverished people, including myself. I mean, compared to the really, really poor people, we were okay. But what is poverty just perpetual and permanent thing that you can never resolve? And why are certain people richer than others? And are they rich because they're righteous, they work hard? You know, the Protestant work ethic, right? Like God,
country, family.
Yeah, God rewarded you because you're righteous and virtuous, and you work really hard. So does that mean like if you're poor, God is punishing you, right? So some people feel comfortable like not helping the poor because they feel like this is just a natural divine punishment. But I don't know if I don't know if that's the case. But I'm deeply fascinated, and I don't like people suffering unnecessarily. You know, you learn more about society, how they treat the poor and women and minorities. You know. And I love this country, but there's times it's a bit shameful how we treat them. So I like talking to them because they really fascinate me. It's a really good, fun conversation. But hopefully, you have many smart listeners. Hopefully, many young kids. Maybe they will study sexology. I don't know what's the proper term. Studying sex and sexual deviancy, or finance, or maybe there's a new discipline that we haven't really considered. Maybe it's a combination of economics and sexuality, and maybe we don't have a
sexonomics.
Yeah, no, seriously, maybe there is need for that. I think some of the things that Bernie Madoff was doing seemed like it was out of the sexual frustration, or trying to literally financially rape those people. So maybe there is an element of psychology, economics, and sexual deviancy and sexual fantasy. Maybe there need to be a new discipline, you know. Who knows, maybe in 20, 30, 40 years, maybe years after I die, there is a branch of a Nobel Prize for Economics. It have something to do with sexual deviance in economics.
Yoshiology. We have to go perform
Yeah, we
now,
gotta go
Yoshi.
and do a show.
I just want to thank you for participating in the podcast for the third time in less than 24 hours.
Yeah.
This is our third recording.
No, but
and hopefully this one sticks.
It's really fun talking to you. It's really fun to talk to my friend Joey Kurtzman, obviously Jewish. And because, you know, the way you guys think the way you think and talk, you literally dance with your words. You literally dance with your ideas, you know. A lot of my other friends, they're not stupid. They're more street smart, but their attitude is like, why the fuck do you give a shit about that? But these are the ideas that move the world, you know.
Yes. Anyway, I want to thank you
Thanks, man.
for inviting me to Memphis, and I want to thank you
Thanks for killing it, doing a great job, and everybody was very pleased with the show. And I can't wait till we keep doing shows, work on projects in the future, because I think people really enjoy hearing that.
Same here, Yoshi.
Thank you for listening to Deconstructive Criticism. This episode's guest was Yoshi Obayashi. You can find Yoshi on social media, and if you want to see more of Yoshi, I strongly recommend that you go see him at the Edinburgh Fringe Festival, where he will perform in his one-man show, Adult Content. Thank you for supporting this podcast, whether it's on Patreon at patreon.com/AaronFlam, via PayPal with Bitcoin, or on Swish 0046 768 943737. 0046 768 943737. You are truly a capitalist hero. You can also support me by buying my book, This is a Swedish Tiger, on Amazon, and maybe find out why the state of Sweden prosecuted me for years just for writing that book. I am Aaron Flam. Until next time, have a good unit of time.